Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Mother Nature Doesn't Give a Crap with Geoff Sheffrin. I'm your moderator, Peter Reynolds. Geoff, you're a professional engineer with degrees in electrical and mechanical engineering and over 20 years experience. You're a busy guy. What made you decide, I want to start a podcast?
Well, interesting thought. I think I got entranced in environmental issues probably years back. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring book is up behind me. And I probably first read that, and it was very important at that time, but it wasn't climate change. And I would say in the last decade or more, as climate change is starting to develop from global warming into climate change, into what I now call a climate crisis, I'm saying there's just not enough happening in order to get us out of this problem. But let me explain a little bit more of the background of that. This crisis, in my opinion, is real. You could deny it all you like, but if you go back and check the facts and figures, we're now at over 97% of the global scientific community and the global scientific reports, they say human activity is the cause. Look at the extreme weather events right now. Atmospheric temperature is now up by 1.2 degrees Celsius. That doesn't sound like much, but I'll explain more in a second. The oceans have warmed by 0.7 degrees Celsius. That sounds even more trivial, but it's not. And whilst it doesn't sound like much, these two events shift the jet streams. The jet streams are what goes around the globe at high level, and they carry the weather patterns. And that's what drives what goes on in terms of how we receive weather. Right? What's happening with global warming is the ice caps are melting. With the ice caps melting both in the Arctic and in the Antarctic and Greenland, we're also releasing ice that is centuries old, and we're releasing methane with that, which is adding to our global warming problems. Right? So that's one of the issues. We've also got this whole ocean warming thing. It's moving species around. Right? So we're getting species shifting. We're getting all of these events which are causing more and more extreme weather events. That's our problem. And my view is, in the whole of our globe, the whole planet, if it doesn't come from Mother Nature, if it's not naturally occurring, then somewhere, somehow, an engineer has been involved in making what we have today. And if you look around you, wherever, inside, outside, wherever you go, there is nothing that hasn't been engineered to be part of our society. So my view is, if anybody can fix the problems, it's engineers. So I'm trying to reach out mostly to the engineering community, but I also want to reach out to everybody because this is everybody's problem. My view is we need to fix the cause, not the effect. Long answer to a short question.
And how does the title come into play? Mother Nature Doesn't Give a Crap.
Well, may I say, originally I wanted to say Mother Nature doesn't give an SHIT. But I'm told that in spite of these popular platforms, they won't take an expletive in the title, but they'll hammer around with your privacy and they'll data mine and all sorts of crap. But I can't put an expletive into it. Never mind. It's now crap because crap seems to be more acceptable than shit. I'm sorry for those with sensitive ears. But, that's just the way it is. I've got to have a title that catches attention.
And I know you've talked, Geoff, about this idea that, humans and politicians, we all, have our targets, 2025, 2030, 2040.
Yep.
But Mother Nature really doesn't care about our timelines.
Well, let me talk about that for a second. It's a good intro for me. Thank you. My view is, as I originally said, Mother Nature doesn't give a CRAP now. The point is, she doesn't have a calendar. She's not on Outlook. She doesn't go to the GOP conferences. She has no idea that we have net zero 2050s in mind. Because when you look at what's going on in terms of extreme weather events, we're going to be too late. My view is, my prediction is, by 2030, we will have screwed up the planet sufficiently that we're going to be in dire straits. 2030. We don't have longer. So I'm trying to find ways of stirring things up to make things happen.
And that's interesting that, in targeting, the general public, but engineers as well, because they've created the products and the industries that are causing the problem. They're the ones to fix it.
Yes. And I think it's a bit unfair to say engineers are causing the problem. We've just done what in the economics have driven us for the last 150 years, since somebody invented the steam engine and shoveled coal to fire it, right? So 150 years later, we just developed society from all the technical attributes that it now has. And, we're in a situation where it's now got to the point where it's about to be totally out of control. The big factor in this out of control is what we're dealing with is not reversible. When I say it's not reversible, you can reverse it, but you try and get all the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that we've created. You need one.
And you can't refreeze the polar ice caps.
You got it. And Mother Nature isn't going to say, oh, they fixed the problem? Good, let's turn off the problems that she's causing. That ain't going to happen. It'll take decades, probably a few centuries, before we get rid of all this crap.
So obviously, the climate change and global warming, of course, you touched on that sort of misnomer of global warming, where it's really a case of climate change because our world and environment is so complex. But it can seem overwhelming. I think, for myself, full disclosure, I'm a video producer by trade, so I'm very new to this topic. And probably like many out there, my connection to solving the climate crisis is recycling and taking out my green bin.
Yep.
So perhaps you can talk a little bit about some of the key issues that are happening around the world, and just to kind of bring us up to speed.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about where the latest disasters appear to be taking us. Some key current data on the topic, which I don't hold myself out as an expert on this topic, but I am a student of it. I look at an awful lot of stuff, and I have a very small select list of what I consider to be viable data sources, which are well-researched and highly creditable. So that's what I work with. So my view in this regard is we've got some key data in terms of various things that we have that are green, whether it's hydro or nuclear or, other things, etc. There's a variety of things that are happening. And I'm a teeny bit off topic at the moment, so let me just switch around a note, if I may, because...
That's what our first episode is about, Geoff. We're figuring it out.
We are figuring it out because I need to figure it out. No, dear. You might want to edit this piece out later, Peter. But there you go. So here are some of the issues.
Go ahead.
Here are some of the issues that are really currently getting us to where we are and why I have such a high level of concern. We have all of these extreme weather events. When I look at the research, the extreme weather events are not happening more frequently, but they're happening with much more severity. You look at the floods in Pakistan. They're unprecedented. They started in June. They haven't gone away yet, right? Almost 1,800 people have been killed. 330 million people have been displaced. 1/3 of the country was flooded. Can you imagine that? Right? If I go to South America, there's floods happening in Venezuela and Colombia. I go to China. China is having floods. Europe had some floods this summer, right? The other side of the equation, we're getting droughts. BC, right at the moment, a large swath of BC is in serious drought and has been for months. They don't know where they're going to get enough water from to do things, to live day-to-day lives. BC's in a bad shape. Africa's in the same shape when it comes to droughts. China, on the one side, China's got floods. On the other side, China's got droughts. Right? Australia, we're getting droughts there. You look at more local stuff, the recent 2 hurricanes, Fiona and Ian, both more severe than we've experienced previously. Right? They aren't the very worst we've had, but what I'm seeing is the severity of these is ramping up all the time. This is Mother Nature saying, I don't give a shit. You guys can't get this fixed. I'll fix it for you. And the best way she can fix it is wipe out 1 billion or 2 of our population. Sorry, that sounds a bit nasty, doesn't it?
No, I think, I sometimes think straight talk is what we need. It's interesting to me that, when we talk about the climate crisis, when things happen slowly, it's the old story of the frog in the pot of water.
Yes.
And, with something like COVID that happened immediately, that the whole world was shut down, that was like boiling water. We tossed the frog in and it jumped out. We reacted. We spent the money, to find a treatment, and the whole world pulled together.
Yep.
But the climate crisis is just like a pot of lukewarm water that's slowly being boiled. We don't notice it. We notice it a little bit, but then we adjust.
Yeah.
Two stories I read recently. One was with Fiona. The government was looking to put money into designing homes that could withstand stronger hurricanes. Exactly.
Don't talk to me about adaptation. It drives me crazy. But go on.
Yeah, and then they were saying, for example, when it comes to our farming, well, it's just going to move north, and soon, we'll be growing strawberries, in Manitoba, and we have to adjust our economics to account for that. Well, that really does seem to be putting a Band-Aid, and not looking at the real problem.
I agree. That's all we're doing. We're not addressing the root causes. We are looking at the problems. They're regional. They are incremental. We'll do this. We'll adapt. We'll fix that. Move on. It just doesn't happen. It's not happening quickly enough. And we'll pay the price for that very soon.
You talked about, I know we've talked about this idea of the three things.
Yeah.
To start to address this issue. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is an oversimplification from my point of view. What I've said is there's only three big picture things that we need. One is technology. Two is leadership. And three is money. If I start off with technology, we already have an incredible amount of global green technology. It's just not well enough developed. It's not widely enough spread to sustain us, right? If I go off on a tangent for that for a second, the global energy consumption right now is approximately 170,000 terawatt hours. That's 170 with 15 zeros tacked on the end of it. That's an incredible amount of energy. Right? That's the globe. The electrical capacity that we have in the globe is around 35,000 terawatt hours. You'll notice that my total energy and what I can do electrically is almost 5 to 1 apart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's only piece of good news is a chunk of my higher number is from fossil fuels, with coal being the worst offender. If I generate 1 gigawatt of power, which is about the size of one nuclear generator, not a nuclear power station, one nuclear generator, I generate 1 gigawatt. If I do that from a nuclear generator, I develop about 4 tons of CO2 delivering that gigawatt. If I do it from a coal-powered fire station, I deliver about 860 tons of CO2.
Wow.
More than 200 times as much. The other bad thing about it is if I'm doing it from coal, over half of the energy that I burn in order to generate heat for electricity generation goes up the stack as CO2. It doesn't deliver anything for us. So coal is the least efficient energy source for electricity. Oil, gas, a little less so, but they're by no means good solutions. We've got to get off this stuff, right? So that talks a bit about the technology. We have the technology. We have wind, we have solar, we have hydro, we have nuclear. We have all sorts of technologies. We just don't have enough of it, right? And even if we had enough of it, we've got to have a grid to distribute it all in each part of the world. It's not happening just yet. We're too far away. So let me talk about money for a moment. That's a really interesting question because at one stage a little while ago, I'm saying, we probably need 20 or 30 trillion dollars. Well, I now think my starting number is $40 trillion. Let's put this into perspective. There have been two events in the last 100 years that have spent trillions of dollars. One of them was World War II, when we marshaled our resources, spent the money. Canada built, I think, 1,300 fighter planes. We built almost 1,000 warships. Just an incredible feat for a small country. Right? But it was part of the overall picture. Money was poured into it. We had the leadership. It was being done. The second one has only just happened. It's the pandemic. And you mentioned it earlier in our outset here, that we stepped up when it became a problem. And that's exactly what we need to do. The pandemic, and I've gone through some financial resources for that, the World Bank, international accounting agencies, etc., they don't all agree. But they're saying 12, 15 trillion, maybe as much as $24 trillion was spent on the pandemic. Well, where did that money come from? Well, nobody has a piggy bank with that sort of money in it, So what happens is the world government said, we got to fix this. Mm-hmm. So they released bonds and treasuries and this, that, and the other, and the money was made available, and we did it. Why? Because it was a freaking crisis. So everybody stepped up. We're not at a crisis yet. I think we're at a crisis, but our political leaders don't think we're at a crisis, which is why we're not putting money of any real significance into the climate crisis. It's not happening. And I think we need $40 trillion to get that going. But let's put the money aside. Let's talk about leadership. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would break the leadership into two parts. One is technical leadership. I look around the globe. We have over 97% of the scientists agree it's human activity that's getting us here. We have engineers. There's 20,000 engineers in OSPE. There's over 80,000 engineers in Ontario. There's over 160,000 engineers in Canada. Couple the US, I've probably got 300,000 professional engineers, and that's just on this continent. Around the world, I've got a few million. Mm-hmm. So I've got the resources to do that. The technical leadership, we can make that happen. What we don't have is political leadership. We've had the Paris Accord, 1.5 degrees. We'll get to that in a few minutes, right? We've had the last GOP in Glasgow, GOP 26. As Greta Thunberg, we delivered a few things out of GOP 26. None of them had teeth. As Greta Thunberg would put it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm afraid she's quite right, right? GOP 27 is coming up next month. I see a whole lot more, groveling and asking and debating and hot air. But I'd be highly surprised if we get teeth coming out of that. Mm-hmm. Right? So, from my point of view, we have the technology. If we absolutely forced to, we can find ways of making the money available. We can provide the technical leadership. We just don't have the political will. Whether that's from an authoritarian country or a liberal democracy, it ain't happening.
Why is that, Geoff?
I think two things. Because it's really, to me, it's the geopolitical issues. If I oversimplify, you've got two types of leaders in the world. There are the autocrats who dictate by their rule, and climate change is somewhere on their agenda, but it really isn't important to them because it's about serving their needs, mm-hmm. right? You look at the liberal democracies, and many of them are into 4 and 5 year election cycles. So climate is important if it's hurting their population and affecting their voters. Otherwise, climate is, there's a problem. Okay, we'll fix Fiona's here, Ian's here, let's do something. Then as that goes away, we fix the problem, we start to adapt. It's gone away again. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. 5 year cycles, short-termism.
Yeah,
that's my big fear.
Short-termism. That's a great term, because I think you're right. It's very much the sort of the horse's blinders. Unless it's directly in front of us.
Very much.
We're not reacting to it. I wanted to touch. We've talked a little bit, or I should say a lot, about what's wrong, and
right.
So what's right? Can you point to anything that's happening around the world or leaders around the world who are doing something, who are moving in the right direction?
Well, I've tried to do a bit of research on what I call climate activism leadership at high levels around the world. And I came up a bit blank.
Wow.
There are some that are much better than others. If I go back to where Merkel was before she decided to shut down nuclear reactors, which was a dumb decision, And I look for people like Arden in New Zealand. And I look for I've forgotten the name of the lady that's in charge in Taiwan. There are some leaders around the world who have it on their agenda much higher than others. I look at people like Bolsonaro, etc. He's too busy burning up the Amazon. He doesn't give a shit. And we have lots of those around the world. So we're just going nowhere when it comes to that, in my opinion. And that, to me, is the disaster that we're facing.
So what would you say the average person can do, the average engineer can do? I mean, as I mentioned before, I recycle, I have a green bin, I have a rain barrel, though it's all stuffed with leaves. So I'm probably more part of the problem than the solution. But for those people listening, what is something that they can do to start this process, to move in the right direction?
On an incremental and personal level, anything we do is a tiny little piece in the right direction. But it isn't going to fix the problem, because all we're doing is mitigating our contribution, whether we buy an EV or whether we're recycling, or, as you say, the rain barrel, or we've installed a heat pump, right? Or we've put some solar panels on our roof for power. All of these things help. Now, individually, that's not going to make a lot of difference. But if I can get 1 billion people around the world doing it, suddenly I've got some substance.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking is, engineers are part of developing and building the solutions. Some of them are in fossil industries, some of them are deniers. But an awful lot of engineers are on the page of saying, we've got to do something. And they are the people that can get involved and do more, because the technologies are out there. We have nuclear, we have solar, we have wind, we have hydro in various forms. We have all sorts of things that are available to us. They're underdeveloped and not overly distributed sufficiently so we can actually make use of them globally.
Geoff, can you mentioned OSPE before, the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. Can you talk a little bit about your work with them and how this relates to your activism?
Yeah. Actually, it's a piece that I was already moving down my more high-profile climate activism path when OSPE approached me for a couple of Eng talks late last year. And I did one on strategy and one on corporate culture. I wrote a book on that, but that's another subject. So I did a couple of those, and at the end of it, I thought, why don't I talk to them and see if they actually want some blogs from me about the climate crisis? So I started writing a couple of blogs for them, and a few of them sit on the OSPE portal. And also, I'm delighted to say, on 2 occasions, they came back to me. The Voice is their magazine, right? So I was asked to provide a letter to the editor about the climate crisis in 2 separate editions. I did that. It sits on page 4 of the 2 most recent editions that OSPE put out there, right? So that to me is another piece of it. Then OSPE had me do a podcast, and we did a podcast for them on exactly this topic. It also sits on the OSPE, on the OSPE portal. So as I go forward, I'm saying to myself, I know this is a vehicle. I know the engineers are critical. I'd like to reach humankind, particularly the global leadership where the biggest problem is. And we've got to move on things. But that's really what's got me started. And what's got me into this is, as I said at the outset, we have a crisis. We're going to be in disaster shape before the end of this decade. And I'm just trying to wave the flag. You can deny all you like, but when it hits you personally in your backyard, because it's just ripped the roof off your house and flooded your basement, maybe you'll be thinking differently if you were a denier. So,
and it's interesting because this idea of, I like to think of people like there's going to be the climate deniers, people who don't believe in climate change.
Sure.
And of course, there's going to be the activists and people like yourself, who are out there, waving the flag.
Yep.
Tell me if you agree with this, that I think probably the majority of people fall somewhere in the middle, where they're not a climate denier, they're a climate don't take it so seriously, or I have other priorities.
I would agree. And when you look at what's going on, I mean, in the US at the moment and up here in Canada, we've got inflation, we've got economic issues, we've got personal issues in that context. I agree. It's not high enough. I bet you if I was living in BC, there'd be a whole lot more people on my page because they've had several months of extreme drought.
Mm-hmm.
If I was living in Pakistan, right, whilst I may not have a vast array of, more highly educated people, but nonetheless, they are living the consequences of a climate disaster. Unprecedented in their standards, So, to me, that's how things will change, because you're right. The vast majority of people will be in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't hit us personally, why did the pandemic get so much attention? Because it was starting to hit us personally. It was killing my grandmother. It was killing here. It was killing our hospitals. It was an absolute horror show. The good news is we have the scientific knowledge for over a decade to deliver mRNA vaccines, technology which hadn't really been exploited. So in 1 year, we turned around a 5-year cycle of delivering vaccines. There is no vaccine for climate change. The only vaccine is fix the friggin' problem. Fix the cause.
Getting back to what you were saying, we talked about people being in the middle and priorities. And
yeah,
this is something I know that comes up in my own family when we talk about what more we can do for the environment, but we're also feeling the pinch from the economy. And with, grocery prices going through the roof, being environmentally conscious is expensive. My son, for example, would love for us to get a Tesla. And I would love to have a Tesla too. But to buy an electric vehicle, to even buy environmentally friendly products at the grocery store, cleaning products, they're more expensive. So I think there are those people that are sort of in that boat where they'd like to be more environmentally friendly, but they're feeling the pinch.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's not going to go away. We will eventually have no choice. It's going to hurt us in the pocketbook. You have two choices. Either Mother Nature wipes out hundreds of millions of us because the climate disaster has struck so broadly that it's wiping out chunks of population, right? In order to fix that, we've got to spend money. It ain't going to go away. I'm afraid I'm on that page too. But I know, because I'm in this business, so to speak, I say to myself, it's part of the price I got to pay. Pay the money. Yep.
So as we're coming to the end of this episode, what can people expect from future episodes? What kind of topics or people are we going to talk to?
Let me talk another thing for a moment.
Sure.
I think one of the questions we might just want to talk about is, where do we start? If we had $40 trillion, where do we start?
Okay, so you win the lottery, Geoff, and you win $40 trillion. What's job number one?
Okay. Well, I would immediately ramp up SMRs, small modular reactors. There's too many designs of those around.
These are nuclear reactors. These are nuclear reactors, Geoff?
These are small modular nuclear reactors. That's correct. SMRs, they're called. We have one going in Darlington through OPG, right? And it's the Hitachi version. It's one of 11 different designs being developed by 24 different countries. There's only one operational SMR in the world. It's in Russia, a small one, right? They need to be rapidly extended, right? We've got to get much more solar, we've got to get much more wind, and we've got to get much more hydro. And my suggestion is hydro from hydroelectric dams is great, providing you have enough water and no droughts to feed the upstream so it runs. But you can also do what's called pump storage and run of the river. Pump storage uses waste electricity, pumps the water up at night. During the day when you have high demand, water floods down, and within a matter of seconds, you've got a high level of power output, which feeds into the grid immediately. The other is run of the river. You have small waterfalls. If you like, the best example of run of the river is Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the biggest run of the rivers, certainly one of the biggest we have here in Canada. That's a run of the river. All the water upstream, even if it slows down a little bit through droughts or shortages upstream, it's still got to flow down, a couple of 100 feet of a waterfall. It drives generators. Right? So those are the sorts of things which are going to move us forward. But the other thing is, we've got to get off coal quickly. I mentioned earlier the amount of inefficiency we get with coal. Right now, China is one of the biggest developers of nuclear power systems, right? There's about 440 in the world, in the globe, 440 nuclear generators in about 170 nuclear power stations. China has about 50 on the books that they're building and planning. Globally, we have about 150 that we're building and planning. It's nowhere near enough. But it's a big step forward. And if you like nuclear or not, and I hate the prospect of nuclear waste. By the way, that's where SMRs can be useful, because some of them actually use spent fuel. Either way, another whole topic.
That is an entire episode, Geoff, and I'm looking forward to that conversation for sure.
Well, I mean, the nuclear one we're going to have to talk about. So, we've got these sort of things happening, but we've got to get off coal. We've got to find ways, because coal is what is killing us. I mentioned earlier about the CO2. The death rates from coal per gigawatt of power generated is about one person in 33 years from nuclear, and it's about 300 people a year from coal. And I think I may have my year wrong. I think it's a shorter time frame there. But coal, through breathing issues, etc., kills many, many, many more people than nuclear power does. So nuclear has the rap. Coal doesn't get reported because, that person died of bronchitis or some breathing disease. Just normal. Didn't happen. There's nothing worth reporting. Right? Nuclear accident, problem. Then everybody's attention gets that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to get off coal quickly.
And so the idea is, with that 40 trillion, step one is getting the technology and getting the alternative energy sources in place to replace things like coal.
Yeah. Can I tease you with one of the very most recent that I've come across?
Sure.
If you install solar panels on the entire Sahara Desert, the whole Sahara Desert, it can generate just about enough electricity to feed the whole world. But how the hell do you get all that electricity out of the Sahara Desert over to China, Australia, South America? Rather difficult. But here's an intriguing thought. If I can put the solar panels up in space, first of all, I have unimpeded sunshine, and I can geoposition them so they're always getting sunshine. And even though the world rotates, I can take that solar energy, turn it into microwave radiation, beam it down to collector stations on the ground, and distribute it into the global grid.
Wow.
That work is just starting. The first one is supposed to be developing 2 gigawatts. It's quite a few years away yet. 2 gigawatts, $16 billion is the current budget. 2 gigawatts is like 2 nuclear power stations, 2 nuclear generators, not power stations. So, if you want to think about forward-thinking technology, it's there. You look at fusion, another piece of technology, and we'll have to talk about this one sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Fusion now has been developed sustainably for 5 seconds. Fusion? 5 seconds? What's the bloody point? That is humongous. 5 seconds of containing a fission reaction, which is what the sun does, with millions of degrees Celsius temperature, which melts just about everything on the planet. But to be able to contain that for 5 seconds and develop power from it, from a heat source, that's humongous. The future, the holy grail. We're going to see that by 2030. Same as we won't see the microwave power projection from solar panels in space by 2030. We've got all the freaking technology. We just need to get on with it. Well,
I think that's a great place to end, because we started talking about engineers and we finished talking about engineers and the
technical
importance,
solutions.
Yeah, the importance that they're going to play, in basically, getting this climate crisis under control. Geoff, I wanted to thank you so much for your expertise and insights.
One small point.
One more point. You know what, Geoff? This is your podcast. You can have as many points as you want.
Just one more. My view is we've got to act. Don't wait. And my closing comment would be, to all engineers and everybody that's no longer a denier, movers make things happen. Everyone else is a spectator. So go out there and be a mover. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate your generosity in hosting this pod.
Well, listen, Geoff, thank you very much. And for those out there, we thank you for tuning in to this podcast, Mother Nature Doesn't Give a Crap. And Geoff Sheffrin is a professional engineer. He is the co-owner of OBK Technology and a principal at SEI. And we would actually like to hear from you out there because your energy, your questions, what interests you is really what's going to drive this podcast. So if you're listening, please subscribe, leave a review. You're going to be able to find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So please connect with us. We absolutely would love to hear from you. I'm your host, Peter Reynolds, more your moderator, really. So let's call me the moderator and let's call Geoff the host. So I'm your moderator, Peter Reynolds. You've been listening to Mother Nature Doesn't Give a Crap, and we'll see you next time.